Are there particular data engineering tools or techniques that you recommend our data science listeners check out first or focus on?
I would say, I'll cover tools, and Matt, you can cover techniques. You're on a Rochambeau on
Yeah.
this one. So tools, there's a lot of great tools out there, fairly mainstream at this point. Snowflake is one, I would say. Data scientists, would have a heyday on. Databricks is another great platform you can get a lot of leverage on. And then, there's obviously each of the clouds has their own ecosystems that, are trying to, get data scientists, hooked on. So AWS has SageMaker. It's fantastic, fantastic ecosystem. Same with GCP's Vertex AI and Azure's ML. I mean, all these are great, great ecosystems. And so, I think it really comes down to what, if you're working at a company, what have they adopted? That's the first thing. If it's if it's an Azure shop, I think your fate's already been sealed. You're going to be doing Azure. So you could try and lobby for something else, but you got to have a good reason. So, but really, at the end of the day, a lot of these platforms are fairly similar, right? It's like they have their own sort of data science lifecycle, for example. And so I would say get familiar with those types of tools. I mean, those are the five big ones I would say. Again, Snowflake, Databricks, Azure, GCP, and AWS. And all of them have their trade-offs. I would say just get familiar with whatever ecosystem you're in and get to know the tools. And it's not to say you have to stick with like the clouds managed tools or open source. Just pick what works best. But there's, and I mentioned open source. There's no shortage of, the Apache ecosystem, for example, has like exploded in the past several years. So I don't even know how many Apache projects there are right now. There's probably more projects, on Apache than there are like atoms in the universe at this point. But I could say the same thing about, data startups, right? So if you look at Matt Turk's data landscape slide, which we intentionally put in the book in sort of humorous fashion, because it's just like a blur of a box because there's so many micro logos or nano logos at this point. But the whole point of that is like, there's again more startups in the data startups in the universe, and there are probably like atoms and a couple multiverses. And so it's like, it's just so there's no shortage of tools. And this is one of the chapters we talk about. Actually, is chapter 4 talks about how to choose technologies. It's like I would think this is actually one of my favorite chapters because it goes through a lot of the ways you should think about assessing what tools you're going to pick, whether it's for data engineering or for data science or even software, applications. So, as far as practices, Matt, what do you think?
Well, let me follow up what Joe was saying about like trying to orient yourself towards cloud-based technologies. And one of the things we talk a lot about more broadly is the utility of having data scientists migrate things they do on their laptops into a cloud environment. There are a couple of different reasons for that. So if you use a common notebook server, that means that you are way, way more streamlined in terms of working together as a team. We see data scientists work in isolation so much because their work just sits on a laptop and it's very, very hard to share.
What are the dangers of working on the laptop, Matt?
I think we've seen this many times, like code getting deleted or data that's been transformed. Someone who's done a bunch of hand transformations and that gets deleted.
And dependency management too.
Dependency management is a huge nightmare.
Because it works on your laptop doesn't mean it's going to work in the cloud. So
yeah, exactly. And so there's this collaboration aspect, and then also it just puts you closer to the data engineers and the ML engineers too, right? It's just easier to move things into production if you're already doing your work in a cloud notebook environment. Doesn't mean they won't have to do work to transform what you're doing into something that's appropriate, but it's a lot closer. It's an easier process. Another, not really a technology, but a language. And I'd like your opinion on this as well, John, but like SQL, we see a lot of weakness in people's SQL chops. And that there was kind of during the big data, the Hadoop era, a certain disdain for SQL developed. And we advocate a lot for the utility of SQL, even for data engineers. And it's not to say that it's an end-all, be-all technology, but it lets both data engineers and data scientists move really, really fast on certain types of problems. So for example, simple things like just filtering down data so you can drill down on particular keys. SQL can do that really, really fast if you're good at it. In terms of practices, Joe, better, let's talk about the organizational practices and go back to that. Just better communication between data scientists and data engineers, ML engineers as well, to streamline processes. I I think there's sometimes in our industry is not enough emphasis on organizational aspects of the job and how it can make you a lot better at the job and better actually able to leverage the technologies to do something interesting.
Nice. Super cool. I love that rundown of tools and techniques for us. We've got cloud-based tools like Snowflake, Databricks, AWS SageMaker, GCP Vertex AI. SQL was emphasized there near the end.
Yeah.
And then some key techniques would be things like making sure that you are using cloud as opposed to local development. Even if you're doing model development in a Jupyter notebook, you can be doing that in the cloud instead of doing it locally. And emphasizing a point from earlier in the episode on cross-functional communication.
Yeah.
Love
And
it.
I'll add just a quick minute too with the
Yeah.
tools. I mean, there's a whole other like parallel universe with machine learning tools, right?
Yep.
So ML ops, ML engineering, that's like this parallel thread going on right now with data engineering. So in that realm, I mean, it's the sky's the limit in terms of whatever technologies you want to do. So what I tried to do in that point was just illustrate, okay, so the commonalities that a data engineer might overlap with, but it's very possible, you might be going off and doing like Metaflow or something like that too. So yeah, I would say for data scientists, pay attention to what's happening in ML engineering as well. Like that's a very exciting field that I would say is even less fully baked than data engineering.